Welcome to the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, bringing you the country's top podcast on the subject of internet marketing, with your hosts Glenn Thayer and the CEO of Intuitive Websites, Thomas Young. Folks, welcome back to another episode of the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. I'm Glenn Thayer, and Tom is with me again. Well, folks, we are not doing a Google Hangout today because we are having massive challenges technologically with Google. And it just so happens that today's podcast, we're talking about the future of Google. So we've got a couple things we're going to run through, 4 different sections here: authorship, Google versus spam, search, and growth in technology. So I guess let's start with authorship. And how important is authorship and content when it comes to Google, Tom?
Well, I think it's important to note that Google is one of the most important companies on the planet right now. And it's probably an argument to say that, between Google, Apple, Microsoft, and maybe some car and oil companies, they're just one of the biggest companies on the planet. They're certainly in the top 10. So they have a lot of control. They have a lot of power. And Google's very subtle in how they use their power, right? I mean, they don't come right out and say, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And so one of the things that we do at our company, we have to, is we try to stay in front of what is Google doing. What are they looking at? How are they functioning? What are they up to? And yeah, for the podcast, we've identified these 4 areas. And we want to start with authorship. And this is a big change for Google because, I've been watching Google since they first came out. And when they first came out, search was based on keywords. That's pretty straightforward. Keyword, website is relevant, has links to it, boom, it shows up. But now they have a change toward the credibility of the content, the credibility of the author, and here's the key, the author's relationship with Google and Google's perceived value of the content and the credibility of the author. And so that's going to start driving search results, and you're going to see more and more of that, especially for niche and long-tail search. So it's just going to be real important that someone at your company becomes this Google recognized content expert. And a lot of times it's going to be at the leadership level of the business. And for the large enterprise companies, this is going to be a challenge because they'll have to deal with turnover. They have to deal with people leaving the company, going to another company. And where does the authorship credibility go when that happens? But this is what Google's looking and looking to do. And when you think about it, it makes sense because for the person that's reading content, the author has always been the most credible source of the content, right? I mean, when you think about a bestseller, you don't have bestsellers written by anonymous. But most of the content on a website has been written by anonymous for years and years. So now that's starting to change, and I think it's a good thing. It's going to meet the needs of the user. But it's important to understand, Google's role in this and how they're going to display your site and the author's photo and your content and so forth in search results.
Now, is this going to be, just for clarity's sake for our listeners, when we talk about authorship, this is authoring content for a user's website or an organization's website that gets submitted to Google? How does that work?
I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that. I know that it's definitely be content that is on a website, and it's going to have to be reoccurring content. It's not static brochure copy or whatever, but it's reoccurring content, probably in a blog or article. And it's definitely going to be related to the number of people following that person. I'll tell you right now, if you're getting followed in Google+, that's going to be the best way that we know that it's relative. But I bet you they're going to find ways to find how many people are following you on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and other sources. And so if you are Deepak Chopra or somebody like that, and you're doing a blog on wellness, you're going to get a lot more credibility than the yoga instructor here locally in Colorado Springs who just started a blog, right? But it doesn't mean you can't compete with a Deepak Chopra if you're the local yoga instructor here in town, because you can get followers in Facebook and you can have quality content that appears on a regular basis. And if you're doing that more than your competitors, then you'll be up there on the page 1 of Google with people like Deepak Chopra. So it's a good thing. I think it's a positive thing.
So when you think about it as a Google recognized content expert, we still don't really know what that means exactly. As long as you have a Google Plus profile and everything's kind of linked together, so where Google can find you on all the platforms.
Yes, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, I think Google has created a monster, so to speak. I mean, Google, I don't think they know exactly what drives websites to page 1 of Google. We see in the work we do what makes that happen, but it is kind of random, and so what we want to do is set the guidelines for things that we think works. And we just covered some of those. And so you follow those guidelines, then you should start to display in more searches.
So the biggest thing is to make sure that your Google Plus account, you're up in Google Plus with your name, and content is displayed not only for your organization's site, but content that you author is on your Google Plus as well.
Yes, and there are guidelines from Google in setting up a Google Plus account so that you're recognized as an author. Follow those guidelines, absolutely.
Let's talk about spam.
Yes.
Because obviously, anytime that you go to search for something, there is so much spam when you do a search. I mean, type something in for, new car in your search bar in Google, what comes up? I mean, there's tons of things. Or if you type accounting in, there's so much that comes up, and there's so much just garbage that comes up as well.
It's so true, and it's not just the spam; it's also the malware. I mean, we're a medium-sized digital marketing firm, and it is so common for our clients to get attacked. We have a client right now that's been attacked by malware, and it's gotten so bad they literally they have to redo their whole website, basically. It's in Joomla, and we have to convert it to WordPress. And I feel for those guys, but Google is actually doing a great thing here because they're trying to fight spam and malware. And they don't talk about this a lot, but what they're doing impacts search results. So you've got to be aware of how you're setting up your website, because you don't want to get flagged by Google as a spammer. It used to be the white hat, black hat SEO stuff. You probably heard of that. But now it's really become, are you perceived as possible spam? And if you are, you will not get good results in Google. And I think it's also important to realize that Google is your friend in dealing with malware. You want to follow their instructions, and probably the most important thing you can do is set up Google Webmaster Tools so your website starts communicating with Google. And if you do get malware, Webmaster Tools is going to help you get rid of it. Because, you've probably seen this where websites show up and you thought you were getting on a educational website and there's Viagra ads all over it and you're wondering, what's going on here? Well, Google's trying to block that from happening. And Webmaster Tools is a key resource for doing that. My thought is that most spammers don't use Webmaster Tools. I mean, maybe they do, but they're probably not using Google Webmaster Tools because it's a direct communication with Google, and then it's very easy for them to be found and eliminated.
How do you know if you've got spam in your website or infected with malware?
It's a really good question, because a lot of times your home page may not show up. It'll be interior pages that show up on search. And so a lot of times you'll find out about this from someone else. Someone that did a search found you and then might tell you about it. Or you'll never hear about it. Or you might see search engine traffic dropping off dramatically. You might see that you've had some web pages that were showing up in search that now are getting zero traffic. So, one of the things that I think is important to understand with Google is you can track data all day long. You can do search reports all day long, even Google Analytics. You've got to go to Google and do the search. You need to do live searches in Google to see what kind of results you're getting, especially if you see a drop-off in those areas. You will definitely see a malware warning in Webmaster Tools. If it's in there, it'll show up. So that's probably actually the best way to do is to get Google Webmaster Tools set up and go there and see the warnings. You also want to keep current on updates from Google. They don't send out a lot of email on what they're up to, but do subscribe to the emails that Google sends out so you stay up on these things.
Let's talk about Google is Big Brother.
Right.
Because I know that's the biggest thing. And right now with everything going on with the NSA and all the data and Americans going, well, wait a minute, it's Big Brother. Everything's being recorded. Everything is being monitored. Well, how long has Google been monitoring everything that you do in Google?
Absolutely. Google is in the business of making money. In fact, they're a big advertising company is what Google is. And advertisers know that the better you know your target market, the better you can advertise to them. So Google's been collecting data from day one. And I would say that when they launched AdWords, that's when they realized the power of collecting data on people and then using that data to market back to them. And that's just so basically anything that Google does right now, you got to understand they're collecting data from you, and they will use that to market back to you. And that is why Gmail is free, and that is why the Google search engine is free, is so that they can see what you're doing, advertise back to you. And in fact, it even goes deeper than that. They're watching to see what you do on websites so they can advertise back to you what you're doing on websites. I recently started work with a new client. I spent a lot of time on their website because we were doing research. Then I go to Google and do something else, and lo and behold, there's an ad for my new client on Google. And I go, what in the world? Well, that's Google watching me, knowing what I'm doing, and coming back to me. So, the thing about this is that we know it's going on. We're not too concerned about it. But I think that you might see a growth in unprotected or protected websites like DuckDuckGo.com, which is growing rapidly. Now, you may never get to the size of Google, but this is a business threat for Google. And I would like to see Google say, hey, you can use our search engine. Here's a private version, and see what happens. Once the private version's out there, let's see how many people migrate to that. I probably wouldn't use it just because I'm in this business and I want to see what Google does. But I think a lot of users would do that. I think a lot would switch.
It would be interesting to see, just because of the fact somebody goes, well, if you go into a private search section, your web experience is not customized anymore. And that's always been the big thing, from Facebook, anything like you got Facebook plugins everywhere. You go off to a website and it's like, oh, you see all of your friends on Facebook. You go, wait, I'm not logged into Facebook.
Right.
But automatically all of your friends show up and you get to see all of your friends, hey, comment as through your Facebook account.
That's right.
And so you're constantly going over there. If you go into a private version, a private browsing session, you're now no longer going to have that customized experience.
No, and that's the trade-off. And it's just going to be interesting to see what our society does with that trade-off. And, it might just be that we all go, who cares, whatever. You can see what I'm doing. You want to know that I'm into windsurfing, go for it.
Yeah.
In fact, let's use that as an advantage. If you know I'm into windsurfing, show me windsurfing gear. I'm fine with that.
Show something like that. And this is just something, this is something that's been touted in social media for a long time, is if you don't want people to know about you, make sure you take all of that information offline.
That's right, go offline.
Don't publish your information and go, well, all of my information is secure on Facebook. No, it's not. They're going to use that to market services and products to you. As long as you understand that, be cognizant when you go into social media, when you post in social media, when you sign up for things. Just think about that. Well, let's bounce into like Google technologies. Now, we were going to have a Google Hangout today.
Yes.
And we have done Hangouts in the past. Hangouts were very, very simple to do, and they changed the way it's set up. So you have 3 people who are technologically savvy taking an hour and 15 minutes to try to get a Google Hangout going, and then finally saying no.
Well, I think it was down today. I think that's probably the bottom line, is that it was down today and we couldn't access it. But the bigger picture here with growth in technologies and apps for Google is they're making what was the most simple search engine in the world now a complex company. In fact, I have up on my computer what Google calls your account and your products. I think they also call them apps. I think they may also call them other things. But, it's confusing, and it's even confusing for digital marketers. And any digital marketer who says they understand this is lying, because they don't.
Unless they work for Google.
Unless they work for Google and created it. And what's happening is fundamentally there's a disconnect between the Google engineers and the target market. And the Google engineers need to get back out there and start talking more to the target market. Not digital marketers or programmers or developers, but the people that they want to use this. Now, the most important thing that I'll tell you right now as a free giveaway about Google is when you set up an account with Google, that account is going to be your landing place for everything you do with Google. And so be aware of that. Be cognizant of that. The biggest issue we see with clients, and I dealt with this just yesterday, is, well, what about a personal account? I want a personal account and then I want a business account. That all gets really complicated, doesn't it? And think about our society in the United States, where we have such a service-based society. Tens of millions of people have very little separation between their work and their personal life.
Yeah.
Right? And so this just all has to be handled, and it needs to be simplified. And I also am a little bit concerned about Google taking their eye off the ball, which is, what their real competency is, and getting into things like Google Glasses or cars that drive themselves or flying cars, whatever they're doing. And they need to get back to the fundamentals and the basics and make these products very easy to use. And I'm looking at what looks like about 20 different products, and then additional products that say we thought you might like, and the ability to edit these products, which means, are there more products that I haven't seen? So it gets complicated.
But they have a thing. My understanding is that Google employees are tasked with taking 20% of their time and doing something crazy and innovative and kind of going, let's think about something totally off the wall that we've never done. Let's just think of new ideas. What else could we be doing? Let's work on other projects. 20% of your time as an employee is working on a little pet project or something else you have an idea for. How do you think Gmail came about?
That's right.
Gmail, I remember Google Wave came out a little while ago, and they had Google Moderator, and they had all these other little products that kind of came and then quietly went away. It's basically everything goes into beta. So if you have an idea as a Google employee, you say, oh, here's an idea. Let's try it. Let's throw it out there and see if it sticks. Now let's see if it works from a business standpoint. Can we generate revenue or collect information and data that we can resell? Or is this a product or service at a platform that makes sense? Or do we just shelve it and call it a day?
Well, and there's an issue here that they're playing with fire, because what they're playing with is branding. So if you throw enough things at people and you get them confused and they use it and then they lose it, then the brand starts to deteriorate. And then competitors are ready to come in and say, you don't need Google for that. We'll do it we'll do it for free and throw a few ads at you. Well, and then little by little, Google's brand deteriorates.
I mean, let's look at competition for Google right now. Google Hangouts. They're trying to compete with Skype.
Right.
And I mean, it was very, very, very clear with our experience today. Skype would have been such an easier option to just do it that way, do a screen capture. That would have been a simple option to do.
Right.
So I mean, those are some things to look at. Obviously, you've got all the competition as you dilute your brand into what you are.
Yes.
You are going to have other competitors step in because they can do it better, cheaper,
that's
and
right.
faster.
And there's a key. We've seen this. I mean, for years we've seen this. That there's a key reference point between usability and branding. So your branding is tied to your usability. And one of the things that Apple has done, which we have to watch them too, but one of the things they've done is made products that are so easy to use that it's been part of their brand. Google started off that way, but now they've got to watch that they don't get away from that.
How do you think social media is going to impact Google here in the future? Because obviously Google is a huge force when it comes to social media with Google Plus and their platforms between that and utilizing blogs, how it's cataloged from a search engine standpoint, and then Gmail. You know, when you're looking at it, you have all these other platforms that come up all the time that come and go. Do you think there's going to be a big impact on that?
Well, I think that they have a huge opportunity with Google Plus, but at this point, in just what we've seen with Hangouts and what we've seen with other things in Google Plus, they need to simplify it and they need to make it easier to use. Facebook is still much easier to use and understand for the average person. Just find your box, put your cursor in there, type, and hit save, and boom, you started to post.
And you're done.
But Google Plus is not that easy. In fact, go to Google Plus and just try to figure out, where do you post? I challenge people to do that. So, simplification, usability are now going to be key to their branding, and especially in these other areas.
So what are key action items for our listeners?
Well, I think number one is subscribe to updates from Google. And as best as you can, get to know Google and at least from a broad overview. And then I think also, if you don't have a Google Webmaster Tools account, set one up, especially if you have a website you want to market. In fact, you really can't be serious about marketing online without that account at this point. Keep all your Google accounts well organized. Keep track of when you set things up. Don't set up a Google account just to set it up and see what happens, because that user ID that you just set up will be tied to that content forever, and you won't be able to disassociate it from it easily. So have a strategy and plan behind how you use Google. Find someone on your team to be the Google author, the Google expert, and then stay updated on what happens in Google by doing actual search results. And keep in mind that search results will be different based on your location. But do search results in Google and see what works and what doesn't.
And based on your search history. So this may be a good time to clear out your cache, clear out your cookies, and do a new search. That's always something, because everybody will have different search results, because guaranteed if you and I search for the same thing, we're going to get different results based on the cookies of our past search experience.
Very good point. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. This has been an Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. For more information and to see all the available podcasts and much more, visit intuitiveblog.com. If you have a website you would like us to review or an issue you would like to see covered in future podcasts, email us at info@intuitivewebsites.com.